Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtatar Shata Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the Sumo devotees. All glories to the Sumo devotees. All glories to the Sumo devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, Text 38. We're almost at the end of the Bhagavatam. Would you mind turning this one down? At the end of the first canto of the Bhagavatam. Yak Chutavyam Ato Japyam Yat Kartavyam Nirbihi Prabho Smartavyam Vajaniyam Va Ruhi Yad Va Viparyayam Yakchotavyam Ato Japyam Yat Kartavyam Nirbi Prabho Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam Yakchotavyam Ato Japyam Yat Kartavyam Nirbi Prabho Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam Yakchotavyam Ato Japyam Yat Kartavyam Nirbi Prabho Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Yashrotavyam Ato Japyam
Yakchotavyam Ato Japyam
Yatkartavyam Nirbi Prabho
Yatkartavyam Nirbi Prabho
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Yashrotavyam Ato Japyam Yatkartavyam Nirbi Prabho Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Viparyayam
Yashrotavyam Ato Japyam
Yakchotavyam Ato Japyam
Yatkartavyam Nirbi Prabho
Yatkartavyam Nirbi Prabho
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Bruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Yashrotavyam Ato Japyam
Yashrotavyam Ato Japyam
Yatkartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Yatkartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Bruhi Yava Viparyayam
Viparyam.
Yachrotavyam mato japyam
Yatkartavyam Ato Japyam
Yadkartavyam nribhi prabho
Yatkartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Smartavyam bhajaniyam va
Bhajaniyam Va
Bruhi yadva viparyayam
Viparyam.
Yachrotavyam ato japyam
Japyam
Yatkartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Yatkartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Bruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Ruhi Adva Viparyayam.
Yatrotavyam atojapyam
Yakrotavyam Ato Japyam
Yatkartavyam Nribrihi Prabho
Kartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Smartavyam Bhajiyam Va Bruhi Yadva Viparyam
Yachrotavyam to japyam Yadkartavyam Nribi Prabhu Smartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Yam Bhajaniyam Va
Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam
Viparyayam.
Yatshrotavyam ato japyam Yatkartavyam nirbihi prabho Smartavyam bhajinyam va Bruhi yadva viparyayam.
Anyone online?
Yakshortavyam ato japyam. Yakshortavyam ato japyam. Yat kartavyam nibri prabhu.
Kartavyam Nribi Prabhu
Smartavyam bhajaniyam va.
Kartavyam Bhajaniyam Va
Ruhiyat va viparyayam.
Ruhi Yadva Viparyayam.
Is everyone online? Yat whatever Shrotavyam worth hearing Ato thereof Japyam chanted Yat what also Kartavyam executed near Bihi by the people in general. Prabhu, O Master, Smartavyam, that which is remembered. Bhajaniyam, worshipable. Va, either. Bruhi, please explain. Yadva, what it may be. Viparyayam, against the principle. Translation: please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all this to me. And this one is text 39. Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Griheshu Grihamedinam Lakshyate Hyavastanam Api Godohanam Kvachit. O powerful Brahmana, it is said that you hardly stay in the houses of men long enough to milk a cow. Purport. Saints and sages in the renounced order of life go to the houses of the householders at the time they milk the cows, early in the morning, and ask some quantity of milk for subsistence. A pound of milk fresh from the milk bag of a cow is sufficient to feed an adult with all vitamin values, and therefore saints and sages live only on milk. Even the poorest of the householders keep at least 10 cows, each delivering 12 to 20 quarts of milk, and therefore no one hesitates to spare a few pounds of milk for the mendicants. It is the duty of householders to maintain the saints and sages like the children. So a saint like Shukadev Goswami would hardly stay at the house of a householder for more than 5 minutes in the morning. In other words, such saints are very rarely seen in the houses of householders, and Maharaj Parikshit therefore prayed to him to instruct him as soon as possible. The householders also should be intelligent enough to get some transcendental information from visiting sages. The householder should not foolishly ask a saint to deliver what is available in the market. That should be the reciprocal relation between the saints and the householders. Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So there's a lot of nice points in these two texts and purport. So I'll try to go through some points that stood out and then do questions at the end. And if there's anything at any time that Maharaj would like to say, we'd all be very pleased and enlivened to hear. Yes.
Well, this verse is special to me. One time I was doing spiritual sky incense sales. I was traveling around in California, and I was in the area of Ojai, selling incense. And when I was in the store, it's a drugstore, I think, or some kind of a store, there's a young man in there, and he saw, somehow or other we began speaking, and I sold him a Bhagavad Gita. So he was a young man, he was very happy, and he bought it. And as he was leaving, I thought, he's just going to leave now, and it'd be nice to follow up with him somehow or other to help him read it, understand it. So I remembered this verse because I studied this verse that morning in my class, my Bhagavatam class by myself. I read this verse. And I said, he was driving off in his truck. I said, wait. And he stopped, he was driving. He said, what? I said, do you have any milk? And he said, yes. He said, follow me. So I got in my car and I followed him, went to his house. And his mother was there, and he had two sisters. Anyway, to make a long story short, I preached to them, stayed there for a few days. And then every time I would come on that tour, the Spiritual Sky Incense tour, I would stay with them. Eventually, all three became devotees, initiated disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shukadev Goswami ki jai.
It's ecstatic.
So there were a few points that I saw that stood out in the text. That's really ecstatic. So the points that I saw were this point of the do's and do nots. The other one I wanted to speak on was that milk is healthy. The third one was the urgency of hearing from devotees. Oh, and another one was limiting a non-devotee association. There was a small thing about that. But I also heard, I was looking at what classes were spoken on this verse, and Bhakti Vikash Swami spoke one class on this, and the overall theme of that whole class, so we'll get into those 4 points later, but the overall theme of this class that I had heard, which I'll say some notes from, was he was speaking on how understanding Vedic culture helps us understand Krishna. This is the overall theme. So some points from that were, he was explaining how Bali Maharaj was happy when Vamana Dev arrived at his sacrifice, because then he knew his sacrifice would be successful. And he used this to make the point that by serving sadhus or seniors, we become blessed. So this is part of Vedic culture, this idea of serving the sadhus, like we see with the milk reference given here. Shukadev Goswami stays there. The sadhus can go, and like we saw just in Maharaj's story, he's asking for milk from someone, and then they all get the benefit. They become disciples of Srila Prabhupada later by associating with the devotee. And there was this interesting point in that class where Bhakti Vikash Maharaj was saying that generally in Vedic culture, people don't generally say thank you much, because there's this understanding that the person who's doing the service is getting benefited. So I just found that interesting, and I made the note of it. Because the devotee or person is giving the other person a chance to serve. They're giving the junior person a chance to do some service. I found that one interesting. Vedic culture fosters Krishna consciousness. It's the culture that Krishna appears in, and it gives the apparatus between which seniors and juniors can relate and operate. Another point that was made was that whoever has cows is considered to be wealthy. So up until recently in West Bengal, milk wasn't actually even sold. This point was made. If you didn't have enough milk, you could just ask someone else and they'd give you the milk, which I found that really amazing. And then in Vedic culture, there's this whole culture of supporting sadhus because it's known that they have something very valuable to give. They have spiritual knowledge to give society. So it's not that they're forced to like fundraise or something.
Nice example of that was once Srila Prabhupada was going with his disciples somewhere in the city. I don't know which city it was, one of the big cities, either Mumbai or Calcutta or something like that. And they were about to drive away they'd gone to some engagement and now they were leaving. They were going to get in the car. So they got in the car and the key wouldn't start. The devotee kept trying to start the car with the key and it just wouldn't work. And he didn't know what to do. So they were sitting there. They were all sitting in the car. Prabhupada was in the car, Prabhupada's disciples. And two gentlemen came up and they began looking in the window. And finally the devotees opened the door and said, "We can't get it started." And the gentleman said, "This is our vehicle." So it turned out it was their vehicle, not the vehicle the devotees were using. And so the devotee, I think it was Shyamasundar, he began apologizing and everything. And they said, no, stay, Prabhupada, please come over to our house. So they took him over to the house and they worshiped him and everything. So This is Vedic culture that they appreciated so much that he had blessed their car by sitting in it, and they could perhaps be of some service to a saintly person. And Prabhupada afterwards he commented, he said, just see, if that were the Western countries, there could have been some danger. If you sit in someone's car, wrong car, then people become very angry. But here they became very pleased.
Thank you, Maharaj. So this is a really nice example of how in Vedic culture, it's accustomed to serve sadhus. It's like a nice thing, and then the people get the benefit for it. And just a few other points from that class that I had heard was that Vedic culture is based on higher knowledge, so it's functioning. People in it are functioning it functions at a higher level. So it's like Vedic culture works better because it's founded on better knowledge, rather than without Vedic culture that in Western society, before the Krishna consciousness movement comes, we just have the idea that we're the body. So it's very mundane foundation of knowledge, so it doesn't actually function as well. Whereas Vedic culture has so much knowledge available. Let's see. Oh, this point was made that when the devotees first went to India, some people would complain because the devotees didn't know all the different standards and details of Vedic culture, maybe like eat with the left hand or this and that. But they didn't know that the devotees were actually well situated because they were surrendering to Krishna. So that the whole point of Vedic culture is actually to help us serve Krishna. And that point's elaborated a little bit more on a little further down. This point was made that one needs to be clean to serve the Lord internally and externally, but that all of these points and details in the Vedic culture are to instill in us that we're serving Krishna. And that Vedic culture is important, but it's even more important to know why Vedic culture is important.
Another example. When His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami left his body, it was in a village near Mayapur, and it was a car accident. And so when the devotees heard there had been a car accident, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was in serious condition, so many devotees went there just to be with him and do whatever they could do to assist. So the devotees went there, and the particular village, the word had gotten around that anyway, Tamal Krishna Maharaj left this world while the devotees were there. And so they were making arrangements to bring his body back to Mayapur for proper rites. And they were taking him in a bus, not a regular public bus, but a kind of a designed bus for that purpose, for preaching. So the body was coming back, and the people were surrounding the vehicle. Many, hundreds of people. And they were saying that you have to give us darshan of the sadhu. The devotees were thinking maybe didn't exactly understand. Some of them didn't exactly understand what was going on, but the people, they had heard that a sadhu had left his body in their village, and they wanted to take last darshan of this sadhu's body. They considered it very holy. Their whole life would be elevated by getting a few seconds association. So finally the devotees agreed, and they formed a big line, and everyone in the village, all the people, hundreds of people came, and they offered respects to the body of the saintly person who had passed away. So that was a lesson in Vedic culture.
Thank you. So, and then the last point that was made in the lecture. Now, this point it's more of a heavy point, but I felt like taking note of these and repeating them is helpful because they all sounded important and useful. So he was explaining how we need the proper siddhanta, which means we need to have an idea of where we're going, not to just superficially follow the Vedic culture. He was making this point about having the proper understanding that those without the proper understanding will not properly surrender. They'll always try to cut corners to make it easier. But those who properly understand the reason behind following Vedic culture, which is ultimately to surrender to Krishna, then they'll always try to put in more effort into Krishna consciousness. And he gave this example that some people will say things like this, that the holy name is so powerful that if you just spend your whole life engaging in sense gratification, and it's so powerful, so it doesn't matter. And even though we don't chant very much, we have so much love for the holy name, while you have all your rules, but we just have pure love, so we'll be okay. So some groups and people make this point, but he said the people who actually speak like this, they're insulting Srila Rupa Goswami and those who practice Krishna consciousness. And in this way they become prakrita sahajas, which means to take it cheaply, or to try and practice it in a very easy way. And he made this point, which I thought was very helpful, where he said, such persons might talk a lot about prem, but never mention the word surrender. But you won't find Srila Prabhupada using the word prem nearly as often as he used the word surrender, because surrender is the prerequisite for Krishna prema. And so if one fully surrenders to Krishna, then prem, or love of Godhead, will develop in due course. So those are the points from that class that I thought were, that I wanted to repeat. But as far as some points that, and I'm sorry, I was just repeating, just parroting, but I found them very valuable, so I thought maybe if I at least say them, even without the realization, it's still be helpful. So then the points that I found in this text, the first thing was that the do's and the do nots, because in the first text that we had read, we see, please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all of this to me. So Maharaj Parikshit is asking this question, or saying this to Shukadev Goswami. So yeah, this is really nice. He wants to know what he should be speaking of, chanting, remembering, worshiping, but also what he shouldn't do. So this is very helpful for any service we're doing. He's getting the whole parameters, what I can do, what I can't do, and then this makes it a lot easier to do the service properly. So Srila Prabhupada often said that the do-nots are the 4 regulative principles. So no meat eating, which includes, that's fish, eggs, meat, onion, garlic. No intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit sex. So those are the do-nots. And then the do is to chant Hare Krishna all the time, but specifically at least 16 rounds on the japa beads. So it's very helpful to know the do's and the do-nots, because then we can actually know what are our parameters to work within. So here I'll read a nice quote about the do's and the do-nots from Srila Prabhupada. A mother tells only her bad child to sit down and do nothing. If a child can do nothing but disturb his mother, the mother says, "My dear child, just sit down here and keep quiet." But if the child can work nicely, the mother says, "My dear child, will you please help me do this? Will you go over there and do that?" Sitting still in one place is just for those who do not know how to work sensibly. As long as the child sits in one place, he does not raise havoc. Sitting still means negating nonsense. It is not positive activity. In negation, there is no life. Positive activities constitute life, and positive activity is the message of Bhagavad Gita. Spiritual life is not, don't do this. Spiritual life is, do this! Exclamation mark. In order to act properly, There are certain things one must know not to do. Therefore, certain activities are forbidden. The whole Bhagavad Gita, however, is do. Krishna says, fight for me, at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna told Krishna, I will not fight, Sri Krishna said, Kutastva kashmalam idam vishame samupashditam anarya justam ashvargam akirti karam Arjuna. My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the progressive values of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. Krishna directly tells Arjuna that he is speaking like a non-Aryan, that is, like one who does not know the spiritual values of life. So Krishna consciousness does not mean sitting down idly. Krishna himself does not sit down idly. All his pastimes are filled with activity. When we go to the spiritual world, we will see that Krishna is always engaged in... Did you catch that? When we go to the spiritual world. So it's assured through this process that Srila Prabhupada has very mercifully given, that Lord Chaitanya has very mercifully given. When we go to the spiritual world, we will see that Krishna is always engaged in dancing, eating, and enjoying. He does not sit down idly to meditate. Is there any account of the gopis meditating? Did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sit down to meditate? No, he was always dancing and chanting Hare Krishna. The spirit soul is naturally active. How can we sit down silently and do nothing? It is not possible. So that is from The Path of Perfection, Chapter 1. It's the book with the yellow cover. It's small. And for anyone who's, people who are interested in yoga, it's actually the perfect book because the word yoga is used in almost every paragraph. It's very nice. So that's the do's and do nots. And then, so there are 3 other points. The one was limiting non-devotee association, or in the Nectar of Instruction, it's described to completely give up non-devotee association. But I wrote down the word limit because that doesn't mean that, okay, I don't want to associate with any non-devotees, so I won't go out and do book distribution or Harinam or any kind of preaching because I don't want to be near them. But we go out, and when we do, we give our association instead of taking theirs and their habits and activities. We're giving our association so that they can take up this process of reviving their eternal spiritual nature and thus becoming happy. The word that was used here when it's described that Shukadev Goswami doesn't stay in the house of the householders for more than the time to milk a cow, it said Griha Medinam, which stood out because we know a Grihasta is one who's properly performing, keeping Krishna in the center of all their activities. But then a Griha Medi means those just engaged in sense gratification, their homes for sense gratification. So we don't want to associate with such people. There's really wonderful verses about it in the Srimad Bhagavatam, explaining things like one should not associate with a coarse fool who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman, and these similar statements. Because we don't want to associate with people who have sense gratification in the middle of their life, and that's what Griha Medi means. So instead, the devotee gives their association to such persons for the purpose of bringing them to Krishna consciousness. Okay, that's the limiting non-devotee association. Now, I had 2 more. The one is that milk is healthy. So we see this really interesting statement. A pound of fresh milk from the milk bag of a cow is sufficient to feed an adult with all vitamin values, and therefore saints and sages live only on milk. So milk is actually used to develop finer brain tissues. It's in the mode of goodness. So one can understand they can have a subtler, finer understanding of things by drinking hot milk. There was this example from back in the day in ISKCON that people like out on the street would see a picture of Krishna and they would say that it looks like a girl. And this was around the time when Jadharani was making many of the paintings, and Krishna has the long flowing hair. And so one devotee, to try to like counteract that, he made this big muscle Krishna picture. And Srila Prabhupada, he showed this picture of Krishna as a baby. He has the round cheeks and kind of the round face. And Prabhupada said that this is the beauty of the standard of beauty for the milk drinkers, this picture of Krishna with the round face. And then he showed the muscle picture that the devotee had made, and he said that's the standard of beauty for the meat eaters. And there cannot be any peace in human society while there's animal slaughter going on. So there's this idea of milk is kind of like villainized these days. Even if you see products that aren't made of milk but used to have a milk name, like oat milk, almond milk, or these things, it just says like oat drink, because people might not buy it if they put the word milk on it. And yeah, if you try to say that milk is healthy to people, they get a little bewildered now, because there's so many things that say, oh, it's not healthy for this reason and that. But it's the same demonic culture going on, because if milk is useless, then the cow can be killed, no problem. So, milk is tried to be branded these days as being useless, but it's just the same meat-eating culture putting this label on it. It's actually very helpful for spiritual life. And then the last point is about the urgency of hearing from devotees and the urgency of associating with devotees. So Krishna rewards people who are very eager to associate with advanced devotees and those who are eager to hear from devotees. Krishna very quickly rewards them and makes the path to him simple. Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. To one who is surrendering to Krishna and worshiping him with love, he shows the path by which they can come to him. He makes it very clear to them. And so a great way to do this, and the whole thing is to associate with devotees. And if we become very eager, like anything, to run to the association of devotees, we'll see very quick reciprocation, because the devotees know Krishna and they can easily give us insight about Krishna and engage us in Krishna's service. So it's perfect. I just had the last couple of things to say, if it's okay. Short things. If we want to deepen our absorption in Srila Prabhupada's books, we need to associate with devotees, especially advanced devotees, and especially in the activities of hearing and chanting. I really wanted to play like this audio clip, but we might be out of time. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.